The market square was full of noise, the smell of cooking fires, and the chatter of traders. But at the far edge, near a crumbling wall and a pile of broken crates, the air was different. It was heavy, sour, and strong enough to make most people turn their heads and walk faster. There, hidden partly in shadow, lay a small figure. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped tight around them, head bent low so her hair covered her face. The hair was so tangled and dirty that it looked like a mat of old rope. People passed her without looking for more than a second. Some covered their noses, others made faces and whispered. A few laughed quietly, shaking their heads. "Too dirty to touch," one man said as he walked by. The girl did not move. She was breathing, but only barely. Ryan had been walking the market path for something else entirely. He needed metal parts, oil, and maybe some bread if the price wasn't too high. He had no reason to go to that corner. But as he turned, his eyes caught the smallest movement, a hand twitching. He stopped. It was just for a moment, but in that moment, the noise of the market seemed to fade. He took a step toward the alley. A woman selling fruit noticed and called after him, "Don't go near her. You'll regret it." He ignored her. The closer he came, the stronger the smell became, like weeks of sweat, spoiled food, and rainwater left to rot. He crouched down, resting one hand on his knee, trying to see her face. "You alive?" he asked. The girl lifted her head slightly. Her eyes met his for only a second. They were dull gray, like a sky before a storm. There was no hope in them, no light, only exhaustion. She tried to speak, but the sound was a rasp. Before she could try it, and something hit her. A small stone rolled away from where it had struck her shoulder. Ryan looked up sharply. Two young boys stood a short distance away, grinning. One held another stone in his hand. "She's not worth it," one called out. "It's fun to see her flinch." The second boy laughed. Ryan's jaw tightened. He stood slowly, took 2 steps toward them, and the boys dropped the stones. They ran off without another word, their laughter fading into the crowd. When he turned back, the girl's head was down again, her body curling tighter. Ryan could see now how thin she was. Her arms were no thicker than the handle of a broom. Her clothes were stiff and brown from layers of dirt, the original color long lost. Her bare feet were cut and scabbed, the skin cracked. He reached forward slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. She flinched, but didn't pull away when his fingers touched her arm. The skin was cold. Too cold. "I'm getting you out of here," he said. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came. He slid his arms under her, one behind her back, the other beneath her knees. She was lighter than he expected, as if her bones were the only thing giving her shape. When he lifted her, the smell hit him again, but he didn't let it show on his face. Gasps rose from nearby. A few merchants stopped to watch, their eyes wide. Someone muttered, "He's actually touching her?" Another shook his head. "Madness. She'll bring trouble." Ryan ignored them all. He shifted her weight in his arms, holding her steady as he began walking through the market. The crowd moved aside without needing to be asked. Some did it out of disgust, others out of curiosity. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder, her breath warm but shallow. Halfway down the road, a man stepped into his path. He was large, with arms like thick rope and a stained apron tied around his waist. "That's not your problem, human," the man said, blocking the way. "Leave her. She's been here for weeks. No one touches her for a reason." Ryan didn't slow down. "She's my problem now." The man's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll regret it." But he stepped aside. By the time Ryan reached the quieter streets near his small quarters, the girl's breathing had grown even fainter. He glanced down and saw her eyes half closed, her lips dry and cracked. He pushed open his door with his shoulder and carried her inside. The room was warm from the small fire he'd left burning that morning. He set her gently on the couch, grabbed a blanket from the chair, and wrapped it around her. She didn't resist, but she didn't help either. Her body was stiff, as if she had forgotten how to relax. Ryan knelt again so he could look her in the eyes. "You're safe now," he said. She blinked, but said nothing. He poured a small cup of water and held it to her lips. For a moment, she didn't move, but then she sipped, just enough to wet her mouth. When she coughed, he steadied her. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Inside, the air was still heavy with the smell from her clothes, but Ryan didn't care. What mattered was that she was here, alive, and no longer lying in that alley where the world had decided she wasn't worth saving. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she had been left there. But he knew one thing. Whatever had been done to her, it ended now, and he wasn't about to let her go back. The old steel tub sat in the corner of Ryan's small washroom, its sides scratched and stained from years of use. He turned the faucet, and steam began to rise as the hot water poured in, splashing against the metal. The sound filled the quiet room. Behind him, the girl sat on a stool, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, knees pulled to her chest. Her eyes moved from the tub to him and back again, wary and confused. Her clothes were still on her, if they could be called clothes anymore. The fabric was stiff with dirt and sweat, hanging off her thin frame like pieces of rough paper. The smell of the alley still clung to her, mixing with the warm scent of the steam. Ryan grabbed a small wooden box from the shelf and set it by the tub. Inside were 2 bars of soap, a rag, and a comb with missing teeth. "You need to get clean," he said, his voice calm. She shook her head slightly, tightening the blanket around herself. "It's just water," he tried again. "It won't hurt you." He knelt in front of her, holding her gaze. Her eyes were still that dull, stormy gray, but now there was a flicker of something. Fear, maybe shame. He kept his tone gentle. "If you want to stay warm, you have to do this." After a long pause, she gave the smallest nod. He reached for the hem of her shirt, and she flinched, clutching it tight. His hands stopped. "All right," he said softly. "You do it. I'll turn around." He stood, moving to face the wall, listening as the fabric rustled behind him. There was hesitation, then the sound of the blanket sliding to the floor. When she stepped into the tub, the water rippled, and he heard her take a sharp breath at the heat. He turned back slowly, careful not to make her feel trapped. She sat low in the water, arms wrapped over her chest. The dirt began to soften, clouding the water almost instantly. Ryan dipped the rag into the water, wrung it out, and held it out to her. She took it without meeting his eyes. Her hands trembled as she scrubbed one arm. The grime came away in streaks, revealing skin beneath, not the dull brown he had thought, but a pale blue that caught the light in a faint shimmer. "You're not from around here," he said quietly. She didn't answer. He watched as she worked slowly, her movements stiff, like she wasn't used to touching herself without expecting pain. After a while, her arms dropped, and she stared at the water. "You missed some," he said gently, kneeling beside the tub. "Let me help?" Her eyes darted to his face. He waited. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. He dipped the rag again and began at her shoulder. The smell was strong at first, but he ignored it. Layer after layer of dirt came off under his hand, the water turning darker each time he rinsed the rag. He could see the fine lines of old scars on her back, some thin, some jagged. He didn't ask about them. Her hair was the worst. When he tried to run the comb through it, it snagged immediately. "We'll have to cut some of this," he murmured. She looked startled, but then she reached up and tugged at the tangled clumps herself, as if agreeing. He worked slowly, dipping her hair in the water, rubbing soap into it until it foamed. The foam turned gray, then brown fell as weeks of filth loosened and washed away. When he finally poured a bucket of clean water over her head, she gasped. Her hair, freed from the dirt, was a deep silver black, catching the light with every movement. He could almost see her as she might have been before the alley, before the filth, before the fear. She hugged her knees again, shivering slightly now that the water was cooling. He grabbed a clean towel from the shelf and held it out. She stood slowly, water dripping down her arms and legs, and stepped out of the tub. He wrapped the towel around her shoulders, careful not to startle her. In the small mirror above the wash basin, she caught sight of herself and froze. Her lips parted, eyes wide. It was as if she didn't recognize the person looking back at her. "That's you," Ryan said quietly. "No one gets to take that away again." She glanced at him, her mouth opening as if she wanted to say something. But the words didn't come. Instead, she held the towel tighter and followed him to the main room. By the fire, he laid out a folded shirt and a pair of drawstring pants, his, but they would do. She stared at them, then at him. "For you," he said simply. When she finally dressed, the clothes hung loose, but they were clean. She sat by the fire, letting the heat dry her hair. He poured 2 cups of tea, setting one beside her. She lifted it slowly, warming her hands before taking the smallest sip. Outside, the market noise had faded with the evening. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of soap, steam, and the faint smoke from the fire. For the first time since he had found her, the girl's shoulders were not hunched so tightly. Ryan leaned back in his chair, watching the flames. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. But as he looked at her clean face in the firelight, he knew one thing. She wasn't going back to that alley. Not while he was still breathing. The fire burned low, throwing a warm orange glow across the small room. The girl sat cross-legged on the rug, wrapped in the shirt and pants Ryan had given her. Her hair, still slightly damp, fell around her shoulders in soft waves now that it was free of dirt and knots. She stared into the flames as if trying to understand them, her thin fingers holding the cup of tea like it was something rare. Ryan sat at the table, mending the strap of a leather bag with careful stitches. He kept glancing at her, not in pity, but in quiet thought. She hadn't spoken a word since she'd come here. Not one. He could tell she understood him. Her eyes reacted when he spoke, but she seemed locked behind a wall she didn't know how to climb over. After a long while, he set down the needle and leaned back in his chair. "You need a name," he said. She blinked, turning her head slowly toward him. "You don't have one, do you?" he asked. Her lips pressed together and she looked away again. He tapped his fingers against the table. "Everyone should have a name. It's how the world knows you. Without one," he shrugged, "you're just a shadow." She shifted slightly as if the idea made her uncomfortable. He thought for a moment, then said, "What about Lyra?" The sound seemed to catch her attention. Her eyes lifted to his, cautious but curious. "Lyra," he repeated. "Short, simple, easy to remember." Her mouth moved around the word like she was tasting it. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice cracked but still soft, like a note of music barely played. Ryan smiled faintly. "That's better." She looked at him a moment longer, then down at her tea. For the rest of the evening she didn't say it again, but the way she held herself had changed. Just slightly. Her back was straighter, her eyes seemed a touch less empty. Later, when the fire was almost out, Ryan spread a blanket on the couch for her. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "The bed's mine, but this is soft enough." She didn't move right away. He thought she might refuse, but after a pause she sat down. Her hands smoothed the blanket as if the texture was strange to her. Ryan went to his small room, leaving the door open in case she needed anything. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of the wind outside. At first, all was quiet. Then he heard the softest whisper from the other room. "Lyra." He smiled in the dark. The next morning, the smell of bread filled the cabin. Ryan had gone to the kitchen early, heating water and slicing what was left of a loaf. Lyra sat at the table, her hair combed back, watching him closely. "You're up," he said. She nodded once. Her movements were still careful, as if she didn't know what parts of the space she was allowed to touch. He slid a small plate toward her. "Eat." She looked at the bread for a moment, then picked it up and took a bite. Her jaw worked slowly, chewing as though it had been a long time since she'd had something soft and warm to eat. They ate in silence until there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, but it made Lyra freeze. Her hands stopped halfway to her mouth. Ryan noticed instantly. "It's fine," he said quietly, but her eyes were already wide, her shoulders tense. He stood and opened the door a crack. Outside, a neighbor stood holding a basket. "Brought some eggs," the man said. His eyes darted past Ryan into the room, landing on Lyra. She looked down immediately. "That her?" the neighbor asked, his voice low. Ryan's tone turned sharp. "She's not anyone's business." The man hesitated, then handed him the basket. "People are talking. Be careful." Ryan shut the door before the man could say more. When he turned back, Lyra was staring at the floor. "You're safe here," he told her. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. He put the eggs away and sat across from her again. "Whatever happened out there, whoever hurt you, it doesn't matter here. They don't get to decide who you are anymore." For a moment, her eyes met his. There was still fear there, but also something else. Something small, like the first spark before a flame. That night, when Ryan banked the fire and Lyra lay curled up on the couch, she whispered the name again. So quietly he almost didn't hear it. Lyra. This time it wasn't just a sound, it was hers. The wind outside was sharp, carrying the scent of rain and distant smoke. Ryan had gone to the market early, leaving Lyra alone in the cabin. The fire crackled low in the hearth, its warmth making the small space feel safe. She sat by the window, tracing the lines in the glass with her fingertip, watching the gray clouds roll across the sky. Her peace shattered when a faint sound reached her ears, a deep, muffled voice speaking in a language she knew too well. The words were low but filled with command. Her heart jolted. She froze, breath caught in her throat. The voices grew clearer. Boots crunched on the gravel path outside. She could see shadows moving beyond the window, tall figures wrapped in heavy coats. One of them stopped directly in front of the door. Lyra's stomach turned cold. A knock came, 3 slow, heavy thuds. She backed away, her bare feet soundless on the wooden floor. Another voice called her old name, the one she had not heard since before the alley. The sound of it made her skin crawl. It was sharp, cold, and laced with ownership. Her eyes darted to the small cupboard under the table, but it was too late. The door opened without waiting for an answer. 3 aliens stepped inside, their eyes scanning the room. They were taller than Ryan, their skin a dark bronze that gleamed under the dim light. The leader had a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His gaze landed on her immediately, and a slow smile spread across his face. "There you are," he said in his language, the words like poison. "I knew you wouldn't last long without a keeper." Lyra stepped back until her shoulders hit the wall. The one with the scar took a step toward her, but stopped when the floor creaked in the doorway behind him. Ryan stood there, a bag of supplies in one hand, his expression unreadable. His gaze shifted from Lyra to the intruders. "This is private property," he said evenly. "Leave." The leader laughed, the sound low and dangerous. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you, human. Give her back." "She's not an object," Ryan replied. The leader tilted his head. "She's marked. That means she's ours. You keep her. You make an enemy you can't fight." Ryan set the bag down on the table. His hand was close to the rifle, leaning against the wall, but he didn't move for it yet. "You should go before you regret staying." The second alien, younger and more restless, stepped forward. "Or we take her now." Lyra's breath came fast and shallow. She could see the old brand on her wrist where their kind had once claimed her. Her legs shook, and she hated that they could see her fear. The leader took another step, but Ryan moved between them, his voice calm but sharp. "Last warning." The leader's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you can protect her? She was ours before she was yours." Ryan didn't blink. "She's not yours now." The younger alien's hand twitched toward the blade at his belt. Ryan's eyes followed the movement, his body tensing. In that second, the air in the room turned heavy, the fire popping loudly in the silence. Finally, the leader lifted a hand to stop his companion. "Not here," he said. His gaze lingered on Lyra, his eyes cold and certain. "We'll be back." They stepped outside, boots crunching again on the gravel. The door shut behind them, leaving the cabin in tense quiet. Lyra stood where she was, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone white. Her breath trembled as if it might never steady again. Ryan walked over to her slowly, keeping his voice low. "They're gone, for now." She shook her head. "They'll come back." He nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." Her eyes searched his face, looking for doubt. She didn't find any. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain closed. Outside, the gray sky had darkened, and the rain had begun to fall in slow, heavy drops. Inside, the fire still burned, but the room felt colder now. Lyra sank into the chair, wrapping her arms around herself. The sound of her old name still echoed in her mind, each syllable a chain trying to pull her back to the life she thought she had escaped. But Ryan's voice cut through it, steady and unshaken. "They're not taking you anywhere. Not while I'm here." Something inside her shifted, not enough to erase the fear, but enough to plant a small root of trust. She didn't know how long it would take for that root to grow, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted it to. The rain had not stopped since morning. It drummed steadily on the roof, masking most sounds from outside, but Lyra still jumped at every creak of the cabin's old wood. She sat near the fire, knees drawn up, watching the flames, but hearing only the echo of the voices from yesterday. Every shadow in the corners seemed like it could move. Ryan was at the table, cleaning his rifle. His hands moved with quiet precision, each click of metal steady and controlled. He didn't look up when he spoke. "They'll try something. People like that don't walk away. But when they come, they won't get what they want." Lyra's eyes flicked toward him. "You can't fight all of them," she said softly. He finally looked at her. I don't have to fight all of them. I just have to make them understand it's not worth trying again. Her lips pressed together, unsure if she believed him. She had seen men like those before. Their arrogance, their cruelty. They didn't stop because someone told them to. They stopped only when something broke. By late afternoon, the rain eased, leaving the world damp and gray. Ryan stepped outside to split wood, the heavy thud of the axe breaking the silence. Lyra tried to focus on the fire, but her ears stayed tuned to every sound beyond the walls. Then it came. The faint crunch of boots, too light to be Ryan's. Her stomach tightened. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. 3 figures stood at the edge of the path, half hidden by the wet trees. They weren't the same ones from yesterday. These were younger, faster looking, their coats lighter, their eyes scanning the cabin with intent. Her heart pounded. She turned just as the door swung open and Ryan stepped back inside, wiping rain from his brow. He saw her face and didn't need to ask. They're here? She nodded. Without a word, he set down the axe and moved to the rifle on the table. He loaded it with slow, deliberate movements, then slid the bolt home with a sharp click. Stay behind the table, he told her. The knock came hard and fast this time. One of the young men's voices rang out. Open up, human. We're here to collect what's ours. Ryan didn't answer. Another voice laughed. We can smell her from here. You think you can hide her? The door handle rattled. Lyra's pulse roared in her ears. She could feel the old fear rising, the kind that made her want to run and hide under the floorboards. But Ryan stepped forward, swinging the door open just enough to stand in the frame. His rifle rested in his hands, not pointed at them yet, but ready. You've got 10 seconds to leave, he said evenly. One of them smirked, stepping closer. Or what? You'll shoot us in front of your pet. Ryan's finger rested on the trigger guard. 5 seconds. The smirk faltered. They weren't used to someone who didn't flinch, but the one in the back spat on the ground. We're not leaving without her. Ryan's voice didn't change. 3. The leader hesitated, eyes darting to the rifle, then to the dark forest behind them. He had counted enough to know Ryan wasn't bluffing. With a sharp jerk of his head, he motioned for the others to step back. Fine, we'll see you again. They turned and walked away. But the way they looked over their shoulders told Lyra this wasn't the end. When Ryan shut the door, the cabin felt smaller, the air heavier. She stepped out from behind the table, her hands shaking. They won't stop, she said. I know, he replied, setting the rifle back down. That's why we make it hurt for them to try. She didn't know if he meant the words to comfort her, but something in his calm steadiness made it harder for her fear to swallow her whole. That night, they kept the lamps low and the curtains drawn. Ryan checked the locks twice before sitting down near the fire. Lyra sat across from him, her knees hugged to her chest. The storm outside had faded to a cold drizzle, but neither of them went to bed. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the pop of burning wood. Lyra's eyes grew heavy, but every time she drifted, the sound of yesterday's voice calling her old name would pull her awake again. Near midnight, Ryan spoke quietly. You've been running from them a long time. She didn't answer. You don't have to run here, he said. But if you want them gone for good, we'll have to face them. Her gaze lifted to meet his. There was no promise of safety in his eyes, only the truth, and the steady certainty that he would stand beside her when the time came. For the first time since she had stepped into this cabin, she nodded without hesitation. The forest around the cabin was quiet under a thin layer of frost. Morning light filtered weakly through the bare branches, turning the ground a pale silver. Ryan stepped outside with his coat on, scanning the tree line before setting off toward the stream. Lyra watched him from the window, her breath fogging the glass. She hadn't slept much. The image of the strangers at the door still burned in her mind. Their eyes had been full of the same hunger she'd seen before, the same cruel certainty that she was something to be owned. When Ryan returned, he carried a small sack of fish and a bundle of dry sticks. We'll need to move supplies closer to the door, he said, setting them down. If they come again, I don't want us caught without what we need. Lyra followed him as he began rearranging things in the cabin. Water jugs, food stores, the rifle cleaned and set within arm's reach. He showed her how to reload it, his hands guiding hers over the metal. She was hesitant at first, but his steady voice made it easier to focus. "You don't have to use it," he said, "but you should know how." Her fingers tightened around the weapon before she set it down carefully. "They won't care if I can shoot," she whispered. "They'll care if they know you will," he replied. By midday, the wind had picked up, carrying the sharp bite of winter. Ryan kept glancing at the window, his instincts warning him before the sound came, the crunch of boots on frozen ground. Lyra's body tensed instantly. She moved toward the corner without thinking, her back pressing to the wall. Ryan picked up the rifle and motioned for her to stay low. The knock this time was not loud. It was slow, deliberate, 3 times in a row. A voice followed, smooth and mocking. "Human, we've come to talk. Just talk." Ryan didn't answer. The voice grew sharper. "You think keeping her hidden changes what she is? She'll never belong to you. She's marked." Lyra's nails dug into her palms. Her wrist burned where the faded brand still lay, like it could feel the weight of his words. The handle rattled. Ryan stepped forward, opening the door only enough to block the way. The leader from the first night stood there, his scar catching the light. Behind him, 2 more waited, hands resting on the hilts of their blades. "This is your last chance to avoid trouble," the leader said, his smile thin. "Give her back. We'll leave you breathing." Ryan's reply was flat. "She stays." The leader's eyes flicked over Ryan's shoulder, trying to spot her. "She's property under our law. That brand says everything." "That brand means someone hurt her," Ryan said, his voice harder now. "And I don't follow your law." The alien's smile faded. "Then you'll pay in blood." The first blade flashed as one of the men stepped forward, but Ryan moved faster. He shoved the door open, the rifle coming up. The shot cracked through the cold air, striking the ground inches from the alien's boot. The sharp burst of dirt made them freeze. "You get one warning," Ryan said. That was it. The leader's expression twisted, but he raised a hand to hold his men back. "We'll come when you're not ready." Ryan didn't lower the rifle. "I'm always ready." They backed away, their footsteps crunching into the trees until the sound was swallowed by the wind. Ryan shut the door and locked it, his jaw tight. Lyra was still against the wall, her chest rising and falling quickly. "They're not done," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but neither am I." That night, Ryan didn't sleep in his bed. He dragged a chair near the door, rifle resting across his lap. Lyra sat by the fire, watching the flames twist and snap. The shadows shifted across his face and making him look carved from stone. "Why?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her. "Why what? Why risk yourself for me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." His answer came without pause. "I don't need to know you deserve better than them." Her throat tightened. She turned back to the fire, her eyes burning with something that wasn't just fear anymore. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, the air was tense, but it was warmer than anywhere she had been in a long time. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey waiting to be caught. She felt like someone was willing to stand between her and the danger, no matter the cost. Snow had fallen through the night, covering the forest in a thick white blanket. The morning light bounced off it, making the air seem brighter than usual, but inside the cabin, the mood was heavy. Ryan sat at the table, his rifle stripped down in front of him, cleaning each piece with careful precision. Lyra sat by the window, her knees tucked under the blanket, watching her breath fog the cold glass. The past days had been nothing but waiting, waiting for the knock, the voice, the sound of boots outside, waiting for the danger she knew would return. She hated the feeling, but the thought of leaving was worse. Out there, she would be alone again. Out there, they would find her in hours. By midday, Ryan stood and pulled on his coat. "We need more firewood before the snow gets heavier," he said. He looked at her. "Lock the door after me. If anyone comes, you stay quiet until I'm back." She nodded. He stepped out, the cold rushing in for a moment before the door shut. She listened to the crunch of his boots fade into the trees, then silence. The only sound left was the faint crackle of the fire. It was almost peaceful, until the sound came. Not a knock this time, not voices, but the soft crunch of many feet moving in the snow. Her pulse jumped. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. They were here. 6 of them, moving through the trees, spreading out around the cabin. She could see the leader's scarred face, his breath misting in the cold as he gave silent hand signals. This wasn't a visit. This was an attack. Her first thought was to hide, but then she saw the path Ryan had taken. If they surrounded the cabin, they'd find him before he could get back. Something inside her snapped. She couldn't just wait for that to happen. She grabbed the rifle Ryan had left by the door. It felt heavy in her hands, but the memory of his voice teaching her how to load it steadied her fingers. She checked the chamber, just like he'd shown her. The first shadow moved toward the side window. She took a deep breath, aimed low, and fired. The shot ripped through the air, sending the figure diving back into the snow. The others froze, caught off guard. She didn't give them time to recover. She moved to the other window, fired again, this time at the ground near their feet. Snow exploded upward, and one of them fell back with a curse. Then a voice shouted from the trees. "Lyra!" It was Rian, his tone sharp. She turned and saw him breaking through the snow, his own rifle raised. The attackers shifted their focus, some turning toward him. She felt fear rise like a wave, but she forced herself to move. She opened the door just enough to fire again, the crack echoing through the frozen air. Ryan used the distraction to close the distance, his shots forcing them back toward the tree line. The leader snarled, glaring at them both. "You can't keep her forever, human." Ryan didn't answer. He fired again, the bullet slamming into the tree inches from the man's head. The message was clear. One by one, they retreated into the woods, their dark coats blending into the distance until the forest swallowed them. Silence returned, broken only by Ryan's heavy breaths as he reached the door. She lowered the rifle, her hands trembling now that it was over. He stepped inside, shutting the cold out, and looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't hide," he said. "They would have taken you first," she replied, her voice low but steady. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Good girl." He took the rifle from her hands, set it aside, and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She hadn't realized until now how cold she was, her fingers stiff from gripping the weapon. They sat by the fire for a long time after that, the snow falling heavier outside. Neither spoke much, but something had changed between them. The fear was still there, but it wasn't alone anymore. Now there was a thread of trust, woven from the fact that she had stood her ground and he had come back for her. When the fire burned low, she moved closer, leaning against him under the blanket. He didn't move away. His arm came around her, steady and warm. "Why?" she asked softly, her head resting against his shoulder. "Because you deserve more than what they left you with," he said, "and as long as I'm breathing, you'll have it." That night, she didn't sleep on the couch. She chose the bed beside him, not because she needed protection, but because she wanted to be there. For the first time in years, she fell asleep without waiting for footsteps in the dark. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the tracks of the men who had come for her, erasing them as if they had never been there at all.